You know what sucks about Netflix?
Oh, we're starting with this, are we?
They buy shitty movies, and that's why no one watches their shit.
Why did I think that we were going to start here based on our earlier texts? I saw some of the reaction to them distributing Red Notice. Thank you for pointing out to me that they're only distributing and it's not actually an original. That was a detail that was lost on me because they are bragging like they made the movie themselves. They're making it seem like it's the hottest thing that they've put out all year.
Anytime Netflix buys a movie and distributes it, you expect it to be bad now because all that they're buying are just movies that the traditional big distributors don't want to distribute because they know they're awful films.
Right. Yeah.
And so whatever Netflix is left with is their scraps. And at this point, I'm like, Netflix, why are you spending so much money buying all these terrible or mediocre movies when you could invest the money into your own original shows that have done much, much better?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you look at the Netflix library now, it's so crowded. I don't know where to start watching things now.
Yeah.
And it's hard to decide, too, because I know that, like, 6 out of 10 times, it's not going to be something that's worth my time. Like, I'm just going to switch midway through.
Netflix is now going up against Disney Plus and Amazon Prime, which are quickly becoming very mature competitors.
Yeah.
Disney Plus got a huge injection of content when they bought Fox, and they have all of the back catalog, including some of Fox's new stuff that's coming out in theaters and then hitting Disney Plus Star as an exclusive, you know? So I think Netflix is they're just in an acquisition frenzy. They're just buying all this stuff, signing all kinds of deals. They want you to think, oh, you know, with this new Red Notice film, which is our highest viewed thing ever, you know, it's got The Rock, it's got Ryan Reynolds doing his Ryan Reynolds thing, it's got Gal Gadot, you know, and you're just supposed to be kind of like ooh and ah and just totally like dazzled by all of this star power. Not to mention like what seems to be like a dozen new things that get added every weekend that are kind of feel like the fake movies that would be like seen in the background of another movie. Like there's a persistent vibe of like, who are these actors even, and what is this story, and who asked for this?
Netflix is the cheap cable TV version of streaming platforms now.
Welcome to the Extra Buttery podcast. It's a show about movies, TV, anything with a story and actors on a screen, really. Join Jason Chan and Robert Snow's free-flowing conversation with deep dives into characters and plot with the occasional salty opinion. So get your popcorn, I got mine right here. Let's start the show!
Welcome to episode 101 of the Extra Buttery podcast. Thanks again to Michael Spicer Music for that wonderful intro and outro that you're now hearing as part of these episodes. We're very grateful to him and his wizardry as a sound mixer, sound composer, everything. So this time on the show, we're going to be talking about the newest Marvel movie, Eternals, which came out the weekend after Dune, and we'll get into the movie itself, but also some of maybe the online rivalry that kind of sprung up between fans of Dune and fans of Eternals.
Really? I didn't know about this.
Yeah, I mean it's a minor kind of drama aspect to the thing, so it's not worth spending a whole lot of time on, but I just thought it was funny.
Is any kind of internet feud like, small time drama anymore? I feel like everything on the internet is just like blown out of proportion anyway.
Possibly, yeah, but we'll get into that. And then I'll do a quick little wrap up on the new Wes Anderson film, French Dispatch, which came out a little while ago. I got a chance to see it. It was one of my most anticipated of the year. And Jason also caught something else last month that we're fitting in now. The Last Duel from Ridley Scott, who's having a 2-film year with the upcoming House of Gucci, which we might get into in a future episode. But to kick things off, let's talk about Eternals.
Why didn't you guys help fight Thanos? Or any war, all the other terrible things throughout history?
We were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
By who?
I remember kind of going through a bit of a peak and valley kind of situation with this movie where I was excited about it for a while because I tend to like the more cosmic stories in the Marvel universe, the kind of stuff that has like an outer space vibe or like a really kind of hard sci-fi vibe, which this definitely seemed to. It deals with giant space entities and mystical powers and beings from other planets and other dimensions, which I find sometimes a little bit more interesting than the kind of like, the SHIELD stuff with like Captain America, for example. Mm-hmm. Then this movie came out, and the first thing that I noticed was the kind of lukewarm reception from critics. People were saying it was the worst reviewed MCU movie yet, and various, clickbaity headlines of that type. Mm-hmm. But I still wanted to give it a chance when I went in, and unfortunately, I think I'm coming in pretty meh on the whole thing. I don't know about you. We're pretty sure we gave it the exact same star rating on Letterboxd.
Oh, did we?
But yeah, like I didn't even go a half star over you this time because
it's boring as hell.
Yeah, cut right to the chase.
Like, let me just put it in simple terms for you. It was boring as hell. I remember when they picked Chloe Zhao to be the director, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting choice, because not only had she just done Nomadland, she had not done like a film of this kind of budget and scope ever.
No, that's true.
And this is like a big risk for Marvel, because this is like an IP that they don't have like a built-in fan base to lean on. Like, no one knows who these characters are.
Yeah, less so than probably even Guardians of the Galaxy, which was probably the last example of like an ensemble group of characters with really wild backstories who didn't really have any penetration into, average pop culture knowledge. You know?
Yeah. And Guardians of the Galaxy was catered to a very large demographic. Like, you just listen to its use of pop music.
Yeah.
There's none of that in this film. Like, I remember in the 80s and 90s, like one of the reasons why like shows like Miami Vice became so popular was because they had this MTV vibe, right? Because they use pop music all over the place.
Yeah.
This is not that film. This is very atmospheric. It's supposed to be emotional, but I'm not sure what we're supposed to be emotional about, because all the characters are really freaking boring.
Yeah. I mean, in that sense, it does line up with Chloe Zhao's background as a filmmaker. She's not known for doing like riotous comedy or as you said, action stuff, and certainly like on a visual level there are some of her hallmark kind of visual touches here, the natural light and the very warm cinematography, stuff like that. But yeah, where Guardians of the Galaxy really benefited from really strong, well-defined characters, this really flounders with characters who just feel like kind of generic sort of knockoffs of pre-existing mythological figures, like
because they are.
Yeah, and they they hand wave it away by saying, oh well, they're the original inspiration for the human myths, but I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's
yeah, I'm with you there. Like, I'm an original mythology guy, and I don't like it when they do that.
Yeah, because I'm it's sort of, to me, and maybe this is reading too far into it, but to sort of say, oh, well, humans are tiny-brained primates who couldn't conceive of these things on their own. And, it kind of gets into those weird archaeological ideas about, the pyramids were actually built by aliens and stuff like that, which they sort of touch on a little bit in this. They suggest that these eternal beings were holding themselves back from like really pushing humanity along. And, we could have advanced a lot faster if the Eternals had been more selfish. But I still feel to me, it feels like a kind of a cliche at this point almost.
Yeah, it's definitely cliche, but can we just talk about the plot for a second and how convoluted it kind of is?
Yeah, so we start with like the first ever example of like a opening title crawl just to like get a baseline in this movie. Like, they already hit us with stuff about Celestials and Eternals and all this stuff. So yeah, we're introduced to the titular group of heroes who we're told are from this distant planet called Olympia, and they are sent to Earth and other planets by this supreme being known as Arishem. He's a celestial, and we've come across references to Celestials before.
We have? I never noticed.
Yeah, well, there's actually a gangster hideout in the Guardians franchise called Nowhere, which is like inside the rocky skull of a former Celestial.
Oh,
so
right. Okay.
So there's been a few little hints that these things are out there, and they're like ginormous creatures that are like bigger than planets. And we're told in this movie they're actually partially responsible for forming planets and forming suns. So like, forget everything you thought you knew about astrophysics. It's all thanks to the Celestials, apparently.
Even Captain America's shield, eh?
Yeah, apparently. So. Just rewriting history all over the place.
It defies physics.
And so we're told that the Celestials send this group of Eternals who are, they look like humans, but they have all kinds of familiar heroic superpowers. Each person has a different power, and they're sent to planets to defend them from this race of other horrible things called deviants, which are like, mythological looking monsters with they look like they're made of like snake-like rope type.
Yeah, it looks like sinews.
Yeah. And so we're told that the group of Eternals that we meet at the beginning of this film, they're sent to a prehistoric Earth, 5000 BC, and they become enamored with the culture, and they start integrating themselves into worldly events, but they're not allowed to stop any wars or violence or anything. They have to hold themselves back. They're only allowed to get involved in protecting people from deviants. And so the film just kind of unspools in this really sort of loose way where we get these really extended flashbacks where we see them fighting deviants in various times in history. And this sets up a lot of examples for the Eternals to discuss what is their role? How much are they supposed to help humanity? How invested should they be in humanity? And I feel like we get repeats of that conversation over and over and over again, punctuated by occasional action scenes that feel very familiar for Marvel, but like it's just those conversation scenes. I feel like they have the same moral debate over and over and over again.
They've done it presumably for the thousands of years, and they still come to the same conclusion.
Yeah, there's always going to be a few of them that side with who are more sympathetic to the humans, and then there's going to be a few who are kind of in between, and then there are these zealots who are like, we believe exactly what the Celestials say we are. We have to do exactly what our mission is.
My point being that like it's a really boring plot. It's a plot about the annihilation of Earth and a select group of heroes that need to protect it. Yeah. You don't even need to be an Eternal for this to be like a superhero film. It could just be the plot of any superhero film.
Yes.
Saving the Earth from a big giant planet eater. Wow. Okay. I guarantee you that's going to recycle itself when Fantastic Four comes out.
Yep.
Because this is where it's going to lead eventually, right? The whole cosmic thing, it has to lead.
Is Galactus supposed to be a Celestial, or is he something else?
I don't know, but he's someone who eats planets, right?
Right.
And Silver Surfer is known to be like the cosmic force or whatever it is.
Right.
It's an ensemble cast, but I also never felt that all the characters were together. I don't even think they were ever together all in one scene, except for maybe the scene where they're like having dinner, discussing like what side they're on. I think that's it.
They didn't even reunite with the Makari, the one who's deaf but is the speedster. They don't reunite with her until like close to the very end, like right before the climax.
Yeah.
And that's another issue with the movie as a whole in terms of structure, is that what would normally be a scene or a sequence in the beginning of the second act of any other movie where you're getting the team back together after they've been separated for however much time, that takes like 3/4 of this movie, that assembling all the people.
What frustrated me most, and we're going I guess into spoiler territory now because I don't care, the part where they flash back and they explain how Icarus kills Ajax.
Yep.
That is the most like least suspenseful retelling of a murder I've ever seen. The way it's edited, there's no tension, right? Because you already kind of know it beforehand. But it also, the scene just kind of comes out of nowhere. And I think, I wish I had the film itself, but I think if they rearranged certain pieces, it would make a lot more sense. But I also felt that about the entire movie, where, as you said before, there's just too much moving around during the timeline. You're never quite sure where you are, and every time you flash back, it's always some sort of scene where they're talking about whether we should step in or not. and it just gets a little tiresome. And you're like,
and at 2.5 hours, it really does start to drag after a while, where you're like, yeah, we get it. They're conflicted. Like, and now snap. Let's get back to, don't you guys have an apocalypse to avert? Like,
it's kind of loosely tied to the previous phases, because we do get like one mention of Thanos. But I never for once did I ever feel like it was a Marvel movie.
No.
I think it was missing that maybe that one key cameo that ties it all together. Like, I think back to Spider-Man, and the way they introduced him is to have Iron Man in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's missing here. This feels like and I know they're a completely different phase now, but it feels like a very much a standalone Marvel movie. But at the same time, shouldn't you really connect it to the MCU? Because you're not really connecting with anything. It's not like Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi was like, very in its universe, a standalone film.
Yep. It felt very much like standalone films of previous phases, where, it is an origin film, and the characters keep to themselves for the majority of the story, but then you do get that linkage somewhere, even if it's just the mid-credit scene,
Yeah, or even at the end where they draw that circle. Wong. It was Wong, right?
Yeah.
It's just even something like that,
And for a movie that like spends so much time, at least 2 instances, I believe, talking about why the Eternals did not intervene when Thanos did the snap. It's weird that, they go to so much trouble to explain what the Eternals were thinking when this was happening, but then they don't have the rest of the Avengers, any of them, show up when literally a giant being is ripping its way out of the earth. Like, don't the Avengers have sensors and satellites and everything is like, they know everything that's happening on the earth at any given time? Wouldn't somebody show up? Like,
there's no like shield satellite that picks this up. I don't quite get it. But I mean, that's not to say like everything about the film was bad, right?
Well, no, because there were certainly some good bits with Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo, like even though he sort of screws off for the climax based on those previously stated moral complications.
Kingo's valet,
that you get some classic Marvel humor in those interchanges. There's some okay stuff between Gemma Chan as Cersei and Kit Harington as this future superhero that they're setting up, Black Knight. I think he's going to be.
I thought he was a villain.
Is he a villain? I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
Also, I thought Kit Harington's character was dumb.
Well, I was like, I was more interested in the relationship between Cersei and Kit Harington than I wasn't between Cersei and Icarus. So,
which is just, true. And just given like all the Game of Thrones references, it was just kind of, I couldn't help myself but chuckle every time I see them on the screen all the time. I'm like, you guys aren't supposed to be like this.
Yeah.
And granted, it's not the same Cersei, but just the name itself is really funny.
Yeah.
I thought the best male characters actually were Barry Keoghan as Druig, Brian Tyree Henry as Phastos, and Kingo. I thought everyone else was really underused or really poorly developed. Even Gilgamesh, like, he's supposed to have some sort of like relationship with Thena, right?
Yeah.
And I could never figure out if it was platonic or romantic or what kind of relationship they got there. Or was it like a caretaker versus patient? I don't even know.
Yeah, that's the problem with these ensembles. I mean, Guardians was already pushing it a little bit with like the ensemble of like 5 or 6 people. This has like 9 or 10, and you have so many people to introduce in the course of the film. There's a limited number of times where you can have individual characters pairing off to sort of talk to each other and exchange ideas and give you a sense of their personality. You kind of run out of runtime, basically, to sort of really meet these people outside of the action scenes and the plot exposition and all that stuff. So yeah, you do end up feeling like you don't really know these people very well.
They all have terrible powers too.
Yeah, it's all like loosely connected to like energies, cosmic energy of some kind, Thena.
But it's like one guy shoots lasers out of his fingers, one runs really fast, one can create swords out of midair, and just like, where have I seen all this before? You know?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I also found it like visually kind of uninteresting. I think the scale is interesting. I think the colors were not very interesting, even though they had all these like elaborate costumes. I don't know if you felt that way. And a lot of the scenes seemed really dark, like really poorly lit. There's a couple scenes in like, I think they're in Europe or someplace, right?
Okay.
And it's kind of like one of the first times they meet the deviants. By the way, the like the big deviant, the one that's supposed to be like the leader, that one like self heals. I didn't even know there was like one main deviant until like near the end of the film.
Yeah.
Like that's how confusing it was visually sometimes. Like you couldn't really tell.
Yeah, it's really only when that guy starts to be able to talk that you kind of put it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of that was definitely mixed up. I didn't have the same issues with the darkness. I mean, I saw the projection was pretty good at my screening, so I didn't have any issues with that. I just
thought there were a lot of night scenes, and it was just poorly lit. It's hard to see like some films. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, you know, where they had the night battle scenes where you like, it's not my TV, it's you.
yeah. They're like deliberately kind of obscuring it for an effect or something. I don't know,
but. Anyway, I think more importantly, though, with Eternals, is it marks like a kind of a low point in the MCU, which I find more interesting. It is not a good start to their next phase. We still haven't had anyone who's about to take on like the Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans mantle. And I don't even know if anyone can step up and be the same kind of, you know, because the first generation is always the best, right? They're the ones who get it going. And you kind of use all your ideas on them. And it's hard to follow up.
They keep saying that Captain Marvel will be the new Steve Rogers or Iron Man, at least in terms of hierarchy and like being the leader. But like until we get another standalone film with her, it's since the first one was a little bit all over the place, it's hard to see her in that role. And you
also
know,
she's just not as likable.
I mean, I don't have the same qualms about Brie Larson, the actress, but I'll agree that like her character was muddled a little bit in that introduction film, and it suffered from typical kind of middle of the road Marvelness, which, you know, gets it like a B if you're grading it on a letter grade or something. So it's like not,
which kind of describes Eternals, does it not? Like it's a very middle of the road movie. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not good.
I would say it's worse.
There's enough to keep you going for 2 hours. The other half hour, you're twiddling your thumbs,
I would say it's
right?
worse than Captain Marvel, though, because by a small amount, because this is so spread out and so repetitive that even Captain Marvel had moments where...
That's true. It is repetitive.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like every time they set up a character, it's always the same. Like, here's this character with their superpowers. Here's this character in their real life / double life.
Yeah.
And then here's how we're going to bring them to the team. And there's like 5 of those scenes.
Oh,
right?
yeah. And then like I said, the moral obligations or the moral argument gets repeated. You know, they have the very obvious betrayal near the end.
Was there?
I thought that for sure. I was pleasantly surprised when it wasn't Barry Keoghan doing the betraying.
Because I was kind of surprised,
and maybe that was
too.
just our expectations were kind of set up a little bit based on the roles that Barry Keoghan has been playing lately. You know, he often plays skulking, untrustworthy characters, but and he does play a character in this who can control minds, so your brain naturally kind of goes to that. But
he had an interesting power.
Yeah.
And the way he would have used it to affect human evolution or human history was very interesting.
Yeah. So he comes through like he wants to use mind control for basically altruistic ends. So that's not something you see every day.
And that's why I think he was one of my favorite characters, because he, in some cases, he could have been the ultimate villain, but he's more of an anti-hero.
Yeah,
right? More so than any of the characters. I mean, if you want to run through them quickly, I thought Gemma Chan was a very generic female superhero who I must add felt like had very little agency of her own.
Yeah, she just sort of stands around.
Like it really felt like she had to be tied to a male character. I'm like, why? Why are we doing this? This is stupid.
What did you think of the one sex scene that Disney allowed itself?
Oh, I forgot about that. Was so awkward.
It was, yeah.
Just the way Not just because it was like a sex scene in a superhero movie, the way it was filmed and edited into the context of the film was really weird.
Yeah.
And really awkward. And that kind of brings me to the next point I wanted to talk about was Brian Tyree Henry as being like the first openly gay MCU hero.
I would say it transcends. This is a rare case where it moves beyond the usual kind of quote unquote gay baiting where they have a character kind of like offhandedly say, "Oh, and my husband," or "Oh, and my wife."
Well, yeah, thank goodness we moved beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the worst example that comes immediately to mind was like when they showed that Sulu is gay in the Star Trek reboot films, the one played by John Cho.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Oh, and my husband, and then you never meet the husband or really understand their relationship at all. At least in this, we get to see Phaistos' home. We get interactions with his husband. We get to meet his kid on a couple of occasions. So it's like you get to see the family life that he's very protective over. So at least in that situation, it didn't feel like it is just kind of scribbled into the screenplay to get some extra points from.
Yeah, because I think George Takei denounced that characterizing of John Cho's Sulu, right?
Yeah, I think he was pretty frustrated with it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I get that. That made sense. I just thought that I think that Eternals tried to make too much of a cultural statement rather than trying to make a good movie. We had all sorts of like a very much a multicultural team.
Yeah.
We basically ticked off every single box.
Yeah, you've got some PTSD with Angelina Jolie's character. You've got like a physical disability with Makari and her the fact that she's deaf.
You got the black character, the Latino character, the Asian character. You got the LGBT character. The only thing you're missing is a transgender character.
Yep.
And honestly, I thought Sprite was kind of meant to be that character because she's a little androgynous. I for a while I couldn't really figure out if she was a guy or a girl.
Yeah. So who knows what they might do with that character too? Because it seems like they even though we're well into spoiler territory, but they turn.
Oh, we've spoiled this long ago. Yeah.
They turn her into a human in an effort partially to make their lives easier by allowing the actress to get older, but.
Which is like also a really missed opportunity. I would have liked to see what exactly Sprite missed about, being able to grow up. Like did she want to try alcohol for the first time and just, I don't know, never really could because she was always going to be 12 years old or something? Like, did she want to like apply for her first credit card or like vote for the first time or something? I don't know. I just thought that was a missed opportunity, especially when they tried to develop so many characters. And honestly, like, it's not really anyone's fault. Anytime you try to make a movie of this size and with these many characters, it's just going to be hard to do.
Yeah. Well, Icarus really fails in that sense too, because
he was a very boring villain.
Yeah. I mean, we both know that Richard Madden has it in him to do solid performances. He's
does he now? Does he now?
I said solid. I didn't say fantastic. I've yet to see something where I'm like, oh my god, give this man an Oscar type of situation. I'm not gonna overplay my hand or anything. But I mean, we know that he's a solid actor. So, I mean, he's saddled with this kind of ersatz Superman role that,
he said he plays it like Man of Steel.
Like Henry Cavill's Man of Steel?
No, like that his portrayal of the character was very much influenced by Zack Snyder.
Oh, well, then that explains everything because he treats it almost exactly.
Well, yeah, like can you see you can see the similarity.
Oh, yeah, straight up. Yeah. So, I mean, knowing that, I mean, okay, so if that's what he's going for, congratulations, he achieved it. Is that the right decision? I don't know.
I don't think so. Actually, speaking of that, don't you feel like this kind of feels like a Zack Snyder film? Like it's all visual, a lot of fluff. There's a lot going underneath, but they never delve into it. And it's just kind of talky, and it's just kind of flat in one note. And the action's kind of, like you like to say toys in a sandbox type action, right?
Although I feel like even Zack Snyder, if given this material, he would take the opportunity to like choose one driving theme and kind of like develop it.
It would have to be religious symbolism, right? It had some sort of Jesus Christ thing. Yeah, I agree.
He would select that and he would really develop it a bit more rather than just repeating it over and over again. I think he probably wouldn't fall into that trap. But who knows?
Is this your least favorite Marvel film then of all time?
No, because I mean, you still have stuff like the first 2 Thor movies. Like, I could go my entire life without watching those 2 again.
Thor 2 was particularly bad.
What else? Probably
Iron Man, one of the Iron Man sequels, maybe.
Yeah, they're pretty far down there. Iron Man 2, like I'd probably skip that. Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely not the worst. Like some people were saying, it would be the Rotten Tomatoes score is, as we know, it's not.
I think it's a little hard.
Yeah, it's not really indicative of the quality in this case. I find myself wondering, if I even want to watch the follow-up that they say is coming in the credits. They're like Eternals 2 or Eternals will return or something.
Even for the sake of this pod, come on, Rob.
I don't know.
Take one for the team.
Maybe.
I've invested so much time and effort into the MCU. It'd have to be like a monumental failure for me to not like watch all the new stuff that's coming out. Like, I feel like I'm so invested, it's like I might as well be in it. And there's enough like interest and new things coming on that'll always keep me kind of interested. If anything, I mean, watching this MCU implode would be like a spectacle on its own if it ever does implode on its own.
Yeah, I don't know. It would.
But also, more importantly, we know that X-Men and Fantastic Four are coming down the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is kind of the lull.
It could be the lull. Yeah. I mean, the Eternals are definitely, as we said earlier, like they're not the first group that people will name check when they're listing off favorite superheroes.
Yeah, Marvel's gonna have a big year anyway. They got Spider-Man coming up. That's gonna be huge.
Yeah, and I guess they have plans for how these characters will integrate with the broader thing. But I mean, I'm not interested to see these characters interact with any of the heroes that we already know. Like, do I care what Thor thinks about Kingo or something? Maybe, I don't know.
No, it's like they go up to Dane Whitman and you're like, "Hey Dane, Kit Harington, would you like to join the Avengers?" "I don't want it." "I don't want it." And you're like, "Dude, it's the Avengers. Come on. Well, let's have some fun." "I don't want it." I'm like, "Fine, Jesus Christ."
But poor Kit Harington always finds himself choosing these roles only to find that his character is always trying to deny some great heritage or something.
Yeah. I didn't find him to be very good comic relief either. So to me, he was one of those like, all right, this character is going to mean nothing, absolutely nothing in this movie. We're just setting him up for another thing later. Yeah, too bad. I kind of wanted it to be good because it would have been interesting to see the MCU have like another hit with characters that no one knows anything about. And considering all the hype and the delays it experienced, it really fell short. It was just A-list cast like that. It shouldn't happen. And but the thing is, again, I don't think it's anyone's fault. I just think they picked the wrong director. The material wasn't very good. And
next thing with maybe more familiar characters or dynamics or whatever. But we did promise that we would talk about the Dune versus Eternals drama that I noticed.
Oh, right. Sorry. Okay, this went over. What's going on? I have no idea what's going on.
Maybe it was just my corner of film Twitter or something, but there was definitely some stuff appearing in my feed, mostly being like retweeted by others, people noticing these bad takes and kind of making fun of them. But there was basically people who were saying, "Oh, well, They didn't like that Dune had received such lavish praise, but then Eternals was being dunked on really hard by critics." So you had these people.
How is that not fair?
I don't know. People were being very reflective. You know how people get about Marvel. If a famous director like Martin Scorsese or Ridley Scott, who said some hilarious things about superheroes in a recent interview.
What did he say? I missed this.
Don't get us off track.
Okay, fine. I love my man Ridley Scott. But okay, fine.
Marvel fanboys and fangirls get really, really upset when their beloved franchise is criticized. And so they felt that, critics were being unduly praising of Dune and they were just dunking on Marvel because it's a big established property. And so there was a lot of, nasty, poorly informed tweets going back and forth. It was also funny that I think some movie theater chains actually, canceled certain Eternal screenings in favor of Dune ones because Dune was doing better in certain markets. So they actually said, we're going to swap what we used to have an Eternals thing here, but we're going to turn it into a Dune screening. So sorry. And so that spread around a little bit. People, Marvel fans were upset about that.
I love that. Stick it to Disney, huh?
So and without teasing you anymore, I will say that Ridley Scott was doing some press for House of Gucci, which just had its world premiere, and I think it was Deadline was asking him about his view on superhero movies. So basically, he said, "The best films are driven by the characters, and we'll come to superheroes after this if you want, because I'll crush it. I'll fucking crush it. They're fucking boring as shit." And then he went on to say, "Superhero movie scripts are not any fucking good. 3 great scripted superhero movies. One would be Alien with Sigourney Weaver, one would be fucking Gladiator, and one would be Harrison Ford and Blade Runner. They're superhero movies. So why don't the superhero movies have better stories? Sorry, I got off the rail, but I mean, come on. Superhero movies are mostly saved by special effects, and that's becoming boring for everyone who works with special effects if you've got the money."
He's not wrong. He's not wrong, right?
I mean, I love how he simultaneously dunks on superhero movies, but then compares his own or categorizes his own highlights of his career as superhero movies. Which,
I mean, he kind of has a point. You could make the argument that Maximus and Ripley are superheroes, because they kind of are. I mean, they don't have any superpowers.
Yeah.
But their stories are always heroic. 2 things though. So the sort of the section of Marvel fans that are like very angry about this whole Dune thing, do you think they are the biggest? They represent the biggest or the majority of Marvel fans, or are they just the loudest?
They're just the loudest. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like there's some sort of, growing backlash to Dune or anything. It's just a tiny quarter of film Twitter who, they're not interested in expanding their horizons, I would say.
Okay. And what was the second one I was going to say? I can't remember.
That's going to be a nightmare for editing. How am I going to set that up now?
No, don't worry. Just leave it in.
Okay.
Do you want to go into the next film then?
Yeah, let's talk. Well, considering we were just talking about Sir Scott, how about The Last Duel?
A most unspeakable charge has been brought against you.
Jacques Legris entered our home. He attacked me.
The accusation is false.
I am telling the truth.
The truth does not matter. There is only the power of men.
I'm surprised you didn't go see this. I'm also kind of disappointed.
I was really planning to. I really wanted to do it.
But
I'm definitely going to see it when it comes out on streaming, because I've heard that, setting aside the historical knight in shining armor stuff, which I still like, the way the story is told sounded really interesting to me. Also, apparently Ben Affleck makes some really hilarious choices with his performance, which I'm very excited for. I hope you will get into that. But yeah, let's talk about The Last Duel. This is a movie that I think it was delayed by COVID a little bit, not as much as some other stuff that we've talked about recently.
Right.
But it is interesting how they came out with that middle of October when Ridley Scott has another thing coming out in December.
Yeah, so Ridley Scott is my favorite because I think he's super versatile. And I didn't love this film. I think it's decent. I didn't love it. But I also came away even more impressed with Ridley Scott because I'm convinced that no one else can make historical epics like he does. Like, just the visual style, the world building, the scale he can do these things at. Gladiator remains like the pinnacle. But you definitely get immediately transported to medieval France in this film, even though none of the actors are French, don't even speak a lick of French. I think Matt Damon speaks another language. It might be Spanish, but not French.
I think Ridley Scott actually had an answer for people who complain about that kind of stuff.
Oh, really? What did he say?
He was just like, sounds like he was in a bit of a mood lately, because he said something to the effect of,
he's always in a mood. He's a grumpy old dude.
He was like, just fucking shut up and watch the movie. Apparently was what he said.
Okay, so normally I don't mind it, right? So if you think back to Valkyrie, Tom Cruise, they all spoke in American English, right?
Yeah, it was
even though
he had an American accent, but then he had some other guys on his staff who were British guys, I think.
Okay, so they stuck with their normal natural accents, but you just assumed it's explained that they're actually speaking German. But anyway, So in this one, there's really no such thing, if I recall correctly. The thing is, though, Matt Damon and we'll get to him, Ben Affleck and Adam Driver all put on this weird accent, especially Matt Damon. I've always found Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's Boston accents a little suspect. It just sounds a little exaggerated. Like, I've heard Boston accents before.
Yeah.
And I'm not doubting their identities or their anything like that, but it just sounds a little forced. And they definitely do make some interesting decisions in this film. So, set in medieval France, Matt Damon's the star. He plays Jean de Carouge, who is a knight. He is friends with Jacques Legris, played by Adam Driver. And Jean de Carouge, his wife is Marguerite, Jodie Comer, who is this like really pretty maiden. And one day while Jean is away, Jacques comes in and rapes her. And Marguerite accuses Jacques of rape. Jean challenges him to a judicial duel because no one can figure out what the truth is. And the movie is basically that, the last duel between Jean de Carouge and Jacques Legris.
Yeah.
The film is interesting. So it's split up into 3 chapters, and each chapter is the point of view from each of the 3 main characters. And through these 3 main characters, you're kind of led to believe that only one of them is telling the truth, or one of them is telling like the most objective truth. And it kind of unfolds in like the sort of Rashomon kind of method where each person presents their case and then you kind of move on.
Right.
Pretty easy structure, pretty easy to understand. It does get a little tedious because you do watch the same events unfold 3 straight times, although in subtly different ways. At 2.5 hours of this, by the time you get to the 3rd chapter, which unfortunately is Jodie Comer, Marguerite's chapter, you get a little tired. You kind of want things to move along, when arguably her POV is the most important.
Yeah.
In my opinion, this is very much a feminist film because it makes a lot of commentary about, expectations of patriarchs versus matriarchs, sexism, male-female roles in society, blah, 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 blah. I think you would like this. I enjoyed it, but I also just think it's really poorly structured, and I'm kind of miffed at how that can happen because Ridley Scott's always been really good at editing and telling a story and leaving really important information out until when he needs to reveal it.
But do you feel like if they had, say, moved Jodie Comer's character section to the front and had her, they established that she was raped and then she presents her account, would it have flowed better if then we got Matt Damon and Adam Driver's sections after hers?
I wouldn't put it so. I wouldn't separate the 3 so cleanly. I'd actually intersperse the different versions throughout the entire film.
Oh,
it's like a really difficult juggling act. But I do think that is a much better way to deliver the story. A better way to, at least in my opinion, to create some more tension and confusion.
Yeah.
And more guesswork about who's telling the truth and who's not. Because there are certain parts of the sequence of events that do play out exactly the same 3 straight times.
Right.
So there are some facts that are indisputable. So those are things that we only need to see once. And then the things that are disputed, then we can go back and maybe reveal them in a specific order, or maybe all at the same time, in the same sequence, and see what happens. But the way it's cut now is just too cut and dry, too unimaginative in its structure, which is unfortunate because of the setting it's in, like I said.
Right. You've got that kind of structure problem that's sort of bogging things down and maybe even like boring you in certain situations where,
for sure,
where you're like, yeah, we know. Okay, skip to the next bit.
That's right.
But then meanwhile, you do have Ridley Scott doing, his classic thing where he's like really good at the historical action. If he's doing the duel scenes, they're probably crunchy and well choreographed. And
also the politics of the era. Like he's really good at doing that. And I think maybe that's why he finds superhero movies really boring, because they're almost inherently apolitical.
Oh yeah.
It's good versus evil.
Yeah.
There's no like real inner conflict about what they're doing. They kind of go to it with like the whole like SHIELD thing or the Sokovia Accords, whatever it is, but I mean that ends up being
but it's very surface level.
It ends up being nothing, right? Like they still depend on superheroes to save the day. But anyway, so In terms of the acting, I think Adam Driver is always really good. Matt Damon, I've kind of liked less and less over the years.
Yeah, I know. Every time we see something with him, you always kind of cushion it with that.
Yeah. So I think Matt Damon is fine. He plays a very unhinged sort of knight, very sexist, very misogynistic, I think in certain senses, and very cold towards his wife. And I don't think he does a bad job of it, but he plays it very straight. There's no complexity to his character. I think it's very much a character where he doesn't have much to hide. Like what you see is what you get. And maybe that's why Matt Damon played it the way he did. So
right.
It's like, for lack of a better word, his character Sir Jean seems a little basic. Like if you picture a medieval time, man, it's basically who he plays. It's just
right, and he's not defending his wife's honor out of a sense of like romantic love. He's doing it out of sense of like protecting his status in society.
Yeah. So that's a big crux of the film, and Jodie Comer, like, credit to her, she's probably the best part about this film, and she really stands her ground as like the one character who has like a real straight moral compass and stands her ground. And like, you don't really get those two in the same character, in a female character, at least in these kind of films. But Ben Affleck.
Yes.
So he plays this wealthy count who is a friend of Matt Damon's and also a friend of Adam Driver's, but he's like this playboy sort of aristocrat. Like all he does is get drunk and sleep with prostitutes type of character.
Okay. All right.
And have you seen him in this film? Like his costume?
I've seen it. Yeah. I've seen his costume. It's like he's got this blonde, must be a wig. I don't think he dyed his hair for this.
I don't know, but he's got a blonde bowl cut with a questionable blonde goatee. And he's kind of in a different movie than everyone else. But I also really appreciate it because he's really good comic relief.
Okay.
The only reason he comes in is to become like a bit of a power broker.
Right.
Because he's influential enough to like sway certain decisions of the court or the church. He's that powerful. But he's also got this like aloof quality to him.
Yeah.
And he's got this weird accent to him that I can't quite place. It almost feels like Ben Affleck tried to do an accent, but then decided not to midway through a sentence. And then Ridley Scott, being Ridley Scott, is just like, screw it. I'm just going to leave that in. And it becomes really funny. And it just kind of, though, in like maybe like an accidental way, really adds to his character as this like really quirky, like no holds barred playboy. He's actually probably my second favorite character in this film.
Yeah.
After Jodie Comer's Marguerite, which is just, I think, really funny. So like, what happened? Why didn't you actually go out and watch it?
I've just been like not going to movies as often. I've been doing like more rock climbing actually. So, doing like active stuff. Like, what does this mean? Like, I'm not used to this. Anyway, but one thing that I did carve out time in my schedule to see was The French Dispatch, the new Wes Anderson film.
It began as a holiday. Eager to escape a bright future on the Great Plains, Arthur Howitzer Jr. transformed the series of travelogue columns into The French Dispatch, a factual weekly report on the subjects of world politics, the arts, high and low, and diverse stories of human interest.
You don't think it's almost too seedy this time?
No, I don't.
For decent people.
It's supposed to be charming.
Not a bad segue, actually, from what we were just talking about, because it, too, is a 3-story structure, broadly speaking.
But The French Dispatch is not its full title, is it?
No, it is.
In classic Wes Anderson fashion.
Yeah.
It just has to be longer, more pretentious than it actually is.
Yes, I believe the full title is The French Dispatch of the Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun. Although it's kind of like, depending where you look, some people are like saying that that's more of like a tagline.
Okay.
Like that second part is more of a tagline. IMDb says that the actual title is The French Dispatch. Anyway, you could lose sleep over that. But basically what you have is Wes Anderson doing his Wes Andersoniest, I guess you could say. Like, this has got Like even more so than Grand Budapest, which I would say up until now is, one of the examples of like him at his most kind of structured and, Rube Goldberg machine-esque thing with, all these little intricate bits kind of knocking into each other and causing chain reactions down the line. That was kind of like, his wind-up toy of a movie. And this is definitely in that mold too, probably almost to a fault. Because basically what you have is the story of this spin-off of a Midwestern news magazine, kind of like the New Yorker, that created a bureau in a tiny French town called Ennui-sur-Blaze. Which is just, when they said that for the first time, I didn't know that the town was going to be called that. I was laughing pretty hard at that.
It's a very Wes Anderson thing.
Exactly. Because he's well known for loving European and French culture specifically and working that into previous films. So this kind of mainlines you on the French stuff. And what you get is a kind of loose shell story involving Bill Murray playing the editor of this news magazine, the French Dispatch, going around to his different writers in their offices in Ennui-sur-Blaze and checking in with them on stories that they're working on for the magazine. And so you get these 3 big anthology stories that form the bulk of the movie. There's no more connective tissue than the fact that these stories all appeared in this issue of this magazine. That's it.
Right.
And so I felt myself like kind of drifting through this, like not really having anything to grasp onto in terms of characters or through line or anything. And I don't know, they felt like they could be.
If it's, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like this movie failed because of hubris.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, because he's
like too many actors, big name actors having 2 minutes of screen time.
Yes.
And just making basically nothing more than a cameo. And then Wes Anderson going in all sorts of different directions without anyone to rein him in.
Yeah, because he does that to an extent in the Grand Budapest Hotel, but with some of his he has like Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray and a bunch of others playing like other hoteliers or hotel maitre d's that are part of this like secret club that Ralph Fiennes' character is a part of. But at the end of the day, the story of the Grand Budapest Hotel is that of Zero and Gustav H.
Right.
The hotelier and his protege. And so, the narrative is around them, but the French Dispatch doesn't have a single character or even a handful of characters to kind of coalesce around. It's just everybody. And Wes Anderson basically, he probably had carte blanche essentially. They, people say to him,
for sure he did.
You just make whatever you want. We don't care. You're Wes Anderson. So I think maybe a little bit more like creative limitation might have done him good in this case.
Well, I was going to say, this is kind of what happens when you don't rein in directors, right? We can be like, oh, studios are meddling, they don't know what's best for the film. The filmmakers know best. Well, that's not really true, because it's kind of like if you give a filmmaker with an unlimited budget, they give you something that's way too bloated and unfocused.
Yeah. And he didn't, I don't think he had an unlimited budget in this case. Like, he was definitely being held to some kind of budget, but.
Yeah. I meant as in, you have free reign to do whatever you want. You're not constrained by the normal constraints of, a lesser director.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's what happened with Tenet with Chris Nolan. And I think that's what's happening here with Wes Anderson.
Yeah, a little bit. There's definitely individual jokes spread throughout the movie that will make you laugh. And as a Wes Anderson fan, a diehard fan, I was definitely entertained. I was satisfied. I got a certain amount of what I wanted to get out of it, but I didn't come away with it feeling like, oh, this is definitely on my top 5 list of best films he's made. It's definitely not. It's definitely probably towards the low. How many has he made total? 10 or 11. This is down in the bottom half, probably.
So that was kind of what I was leading towards, is that now that we've known Wes Anderson, maybe be at the top of his craft, but also produce something that's not up to par with his past stuff. Going past the plot, was there enough in the film to keep you rooted? Did you like the characters, the art direction, and everything?
Oh yeah, because you setting aside, not having any kind of through line to latch onto, he's still doing everything exactly, like, technically speaking, top notch the way he always does. So there was no lack of quality there. The actors, when they are on screen, are all really, really good. They do the most with their characters that they can, considering how limited they are in their individual roles. So there was no qualms about that. And even, I would say, Wes Anderson at this level of quality, for him, he's still blowing away lots of other directors who, have an off day, for me at least. Robert Yeoman, who's been Wes Anderson's cinematographer for probably like the last 5 or 6 of his movies.
Yeah.
Robert Yeoman says they've wrapped production on the next Wes Anderson already.
Oh, wow.
And now they're going back to England to do pre-production on the next one. So expect at least 2 more in the near future.
Wait, are they connected with the French Dispatch or no?
No, they're just totally different. But again, like, gigantic cast. So I'm sort of hoping that maybe he's not stuck in a rut now where he thinks he can just do these sort of anthology movies again, because I really don't think it worked very well in this.
If you had to give a thumbs up or thumbs down to the 2 movies,
I would do thumbs down on Eternals. I would still do a thumbs up on French Dispatch, despite all the complaints I just listed off.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, I like Wes Anderson a whole lot more than I like Marvel as an enterprise.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's where I stand. How about you?
So I'm gonna give a thumbs up to The Last Duel, and I really struggled with the Eternals, but I think I'm gonna go with a thumbs up.
Oh, all right. So we're sort of
it's slightly up, because I don't think it's bad enough to be a thumbs down. Like, I think there's at least enough there to keep you kind of semi-interested. And I don't think it's a bad film because any parts of it were like bad. Like, it's not poorly directed or acted or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just, it didn't come together quite right.
Yeah.
But I mean, spectacle wise, I still think there's enough interest to hold you in. And I can't say that a lot about other big budget films, because some of the other big budget films really look like they aren't worth that budget.
Maybe like Red Notice. There we go. Circling back around to the beginning.
Yeah. So
this whole episode is acting as a little bit of a palate cleanser after all of the stuff that we heaped on Dune last time. We've talked about 3 movies here that we had differing levels of problems with. What do we have coming up in the episodes to come? I suppose we will definitely be talking about more Marvel stuff with Spider-Man Far From Home. Wait, No Way Home? Which home is it?
Spider-Man Go Home. I believe it's No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home. Although I am excited for this because we get to see Tobey Maguire and Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of my favorite directors are all dropping their stuff in these last few months of the year. So we had Wes Anderson, we have P.T. Anderson, we have Guillermo del Toro. Like, they're all just lining up. Even Steven Spielberg. I mean, I don't normally go for classic stage musicals, but Steven Spielberg is, he's a pretty dependable name, wouldn't you say? With all that stuff coming our way, it's going to be a very exciting time here on the podcast. We will have no end of things to talk about. So until then, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
The Extra Buttery podcast is written, recorded, and produced by Jason Chen and Robert Snow. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to rate and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. And remember, popcorn is always better with extra butter.